very sheltered child when it came to death. My grandparents lived and saw me married. My great-grandmother, in fact, missed my starting medical school by only a month. And I wasn't even allowed to go to her memorial. My parents shielded me from this, mostly my mother, who I'm sorry to say right now. But she was very concerned that it would be too upsetting for me. And so I never went to the funeral. And yet, I had a very strong and secure sense of where death fits into life, thanks to my father. The first time I saw my father cry, I was probably the age of my youngest son, probably 7 or 8. And it was the night that our first family cat died at midnight. We typically would bring him in every night after dinner, and he would stay the night in the house. But this night after dinner, he was nowhere to be found. And we scattered the house, my brother, my mother, my dad, and I, looking through all the backyard, side yard, atrium, calling midnight, midnight, nowhere to be found. And we reluctantly all went to bed, feeling uneasy. It was unusual. And many hours later, likely around midnight, we were all awoken by the most unusual sound, howling, a chorus of cats howling. We found ourselves in the living room in the light of the moon. We convened again, going, what is this? And starting to look again out the windows and the doors for midnight. And then my father gives out a tiny yelp and said, he's here, curled on the back mat in the backyard, right by the door. And I will never forget the image of him bending down to pick him up, wearing what I call his Technicolor Dreamcoat bathrobe of burgundy and brown and blue embracing this cat in the folds, ever so gently, disappearing for only a moment to get a suitable box to rest him in, and then carefully, almost seemingly as if floating, gathering us into our bed to sit at this tiny orange pumpkin table, tiny little pumpkin stools, his knees up to his chin, just silent, holding vigil in silence, with the exception of an occasional toot as he would blow his nose into his ever-present white handkerchief. Tears streaming down his round cheeks. But no words. Until the sun started to crack the window pane. And he said, we are so blessed. Midnight could have gone to die with the cats in his community. They are clearly mourning him. Yet he chose to come to our home, to us. There is nothing more sacred than the honor of being with the creature at the end of their life. This is what I was taught as a child. My father was the administrator for Kaiser Hospitals for most of my childhood, and again had exposure to the healthcare system and shared it with me through his lens, saying how he deliberately created a rotation for the ICU nurses to go into the OBGYN floors as a way to continually remind them of the circle of life. I was very proud of this. He also told me repeatedly, don't ever do heroic measures on me. I would much rather that money be spent on my grandchildren's education. That just became what was sold for me. That was his truth. I can tell you, if my mom were here, she'd nod her head. She does not hold the same truth. In fact, when my father had a relapse of his cancer, he was very clear with me, as he had been his whole life, of what he wanted and what he needed. His truth. What he needed, besides a roof over the head, stable food, the things that he was fortunate enough to know were guaranteed. What he needed was for his wife, my mother, to trust him. How could I know your wife trusts you? How could I support you in that? She wouldn't come to my doctor's appointments. She'd just let me go alone. So then you won't have that day. 4 days before he died, he requested an appointment with his primary care physician to request enrollment in hospice. My mother shook her head at the end of that visit, bit her lip, telltale sign of her frustration. Why is no one fighting as hard as me? The night my father died, he was sitting in his bed at home, his cat beside him. My children, having just come home from their afternoon camp, sat like I am in an armchair next to the bed. And he reached out to my daughter, who then was about 4, and played with her long curly hair. Tell me about your day, Isabel, he'd say, as he just danced in her hair. She would tell him all about it. Bugs they caught. When I was getting ready to leave after my husband had taken the kids home, I asked my dad if he wanted me to stay or go home. He said, you should go home. Just do these few things for me. Can you put a calendar on the bureau? I'm having a hard time seeing the date. Just write the date in big letters right where I can see it. Big numbers. And then can you clear off the windowsill? You know, all his medicine bottles there. It's like it's distracting the view. It was a full moon right last night. See right out the window. And then he said, all I want to do is sleep. And so I kissed him. And went home. And he was dead before sunrise. And what's extraordinary isn't how that was still devastating to this day. It is 9 years, July 11th. What's extraordinary is that in all the teaching and preparation he shared with me of his truth, that I was blessed to have the opportunity to share my truth with him a month before he died. A month before he died, my mother and I attended a mother-daughter retreat, which if you had the opportunity, my mother, you would realize how unexpected that. We actually just went to the 10-year anniversary of that retreat last weekend. And during that retreat, as we're inquiring into what's essential to us, I wrote a poem unexpectedly. After I started to write it, at the end of it, not knowing where it was beginning, at the end of it, I was in tears, having realized what I had just done. And knew I had to share it with my father, as terrified as I was. And 3 days later, I was able to, standing in my brother's kitchen, 3 of us standing, he's sitting on a stool, having just eaten Little Star pizza, we were all stuffed. He was getting ready to go. And I said, Dad, I need to read something to you, and I'm scared. My dad, being who he has been his whole life, is, whatever you want, sweetheart, please. My mom, having been at the retreat, knew what I was going to read. My brother did not. But this is what I read. It's called Bridge to Eternity, My Father's Prayer. I think that if I don't speak my hatred or anger, then you don't know it. If I don't speak it, then somehow it doesn't exist. If I just ignore the gaping hole long enough, somehow it will miraculously close, and all will be as if it was before. But no. When you die, I will no longer be home. No, I know that really isn't true. When you die, I will have hold in my heart that by finding the bridge over the celestial waters to eternity, I will have found my path to healing. This is my prayer to you. May you always know I will come looking for you. I will always want you. I will always crave your arms around me. I will always dream of your breath on me. The tinkling sound of your spoon stirring your coffee will forever be the music of your peace and comfort. You will be well.